Starting off with the East region, a rematch of last year's national championship game in Boston. A little bit of a travel advantage here for UConn, which I'll touch on in a bit. But the number one seeded Huskies overall in the tournament, about a 10.5, 11-point favorite, dominating Stetson and Northwestern despite a near backdoor cover from the Wildcats. I saw you Xing out, tweeting out on Sunday night saying, UConn probably knew the point spread, and I'm probably with you there because it seemed like they were really trying to cover that thing. And then San Diego State held off UAB, didn't cover in the first round, but dominating Yale and then some in the round of 32 and covering both the first half and second half line, I think. Total in this game is 135.5. My raw numbers have this around UConn minus 9.5, minus 10. So pretty damn close to the actual point spread as of this recording on Monday night here. What does Haslametrics, your site, say about this one? And what do you have to break down with it?
Yeah, so I'm looking at UConn roughly by just slightly under 10 is what I currently have. The over-under on this one, I look at it about 137.5 is what I'm seeing. I'm looking forward. I mean, Connecticut is still going to be that dominant team. The thing about, I have a lot, as we've talked about before, I have 4 futures that are not from the number 1 lines. Well, I take that back. One of them is North Carolina. But watching how these 1 seeds are playing, especially the ones that were the givens, the ones that were going to be the ones for many, many months, which is UConn, Purdue, and Houston, just really impressive the way they've been performing. And I think UConn is going to cruise in this one. I think there's going to be a little bit of a regression now from San Diego State. As I talked, I think that was easily their best performance of the year against Yale. You're coming against a UConn team that just kind of, I don't say they fell asleep a little bit, but just a little bit of a, they let Northwestern, they weren't all the way back in the game, but the lead was getting close down to like 15. But the thing about UConn is when UConn wants to turn it on, they can turn it on. San Diego State, they're the second lowest team remaining in the field for me. They're at number 25. They're the lowest ranked offensive efficiency team for me right now, 52nd in the country, solid defensively at number 13. But Connecticut is top 10 in both. Second in the nation in offensive efficiency, 6th in the defensive efficiency. Connecticut has better numbers away from home. Connecticut has more momentum going back from 4 to 8 games. Everything here, I have no reason to doubt Connecticut getting through this next round. I still think that's a team that's probably going to be right. They're my Final Four pick. I've had them since the start. I have no doubt that they're supposed to get there. I did have this game. At one point, I did pencil in Yale. You can actually see it here. I actually did pencil in Yale to beat Auburn, and then I changed it. That's what you get for changing your mind. But I did have San Diego State getting through to this round, but I think this is where it ends for the Aztecs. The Aztecs have played really quite well. They've represented the Mountain West, but I still think there's just too much here for UConn. I got to go with the Huskies in this one.
And what would you say in regards to the spread, just because it's so close to your line, your projected point spread?
Because, and what I would say is I would typically in this situation look at the recent performances, and I don't like when you see a team that really overperforms in the last game. I like to see that regression a little bit in the next one. So in this situation, I've been leaning UConn this entire tournament. I'm going to continue to lean UConn to actually cover the spread, not only win.
Yeah, and that's pretty much a market indicator. You're looking for regression points. You're looking for where the number may be a little bit short. Granted, Eric and our projections are pretty damn close to the point spread, but maybe this line, if if San Diego State is a little bit tighter with Yale, even if they do win by double figures and don't outperform their expectation, to Eric's point, this line could be around 12, where maybe you say, is this line a little bit too high? But since you made the case for UConn, I just kind of want to throw a couple points where San Diego State could theoretically, on paper, keep it tighter than expected. With UConn in drop coverage, Donovan Clingan, which is a staple of the Huskies defense, San Diego State's mid-range game is actually performing a lot better overall, not just in a small sample size than it did last year, going back to when San Diego State pretty much got boat raced in the national championship. Trammell ranks in the 92nd percentile when it comes to mid-range efficiency, 55th percentile last season. Micah Parrish, 90th percentile in mid-range efficiency, 59th last season. Jaden Ledee, 82nd percentile, and he could theoretically pull Clingan away from the rim. I still can't believe his points prop in the championship game, by the way, was at 7.5 or 8.5. Somehow went under. was trying to bully Klingon down low in the title game. I have no idea what he was doing because his mid-range game could have easily gotten the best of Klingon there. Lamont Butler still ranking in about the 50th percentile range. And then Reese Dixon Waters, the USC transfer, 77th percentile. And then one other thing, you mentioned the Northwestern route, or UConn blowing out Northwestern for the most part. Matthew Nicholson not playing in that game for the Wildcats, so UConn had an advantage down low. Klingon, 14 points, 13 boards, 8 blocks against the Wildcats. But kind of to the point that you brought up, UConn's physicality is just a completely different animal than what San Diego State has seen so far in the tournament and what they saw in the Mountain West. And then Stephon Castle, just a complete X factor defensively. He shut down Boo Buie, whether he's guarding Lamont Butler or whomever for San Diego State. I would expect the same thing. And then what I kind of hit on from the get-go in this, San Diego State playing in Spokane, now having to make the trip to the East Coast, and UConn pretty much having home court advantage in Boston. Pretty big edge for UConn there, where you could maybe bake a little bit more into the number than maybe you initially would for kind of a home court advantage in an NCAA tournament game. And then one last thing for UConn offensively, with those elevator screens and everything else they do to free up Caravan and Spencer from behind the arc, like we saw in the title game. Dutcher's defenses and San Diego State in general really struggles to defend motion. So big advantage for UConn offensively. I don't know if they cover, kind of like this is a 1-point edge in my direction for San Diego State. By no means a big enough edge to bet the Aztecs, but still not a big enough edge for me to bet or advocate betting UConn. But still, a lot of big advantages going in the Huskies' direction unless San Diego State just goes off in the mid-range.
Yeah, Connecticut's coming in with that. I mean, just pick your poison defensively against UConn right there. Like I said, sixth in the country in defensive efficiency, 5th in overall adjusted field goal percentage, 10th defending the 3-point shot, 2nd in the country in near proximity defensive field goal percentage. Just, I mean, the one thing you got to do if you're San Diego State, you got to look at the advantages of where you can get them. They can get to the foul line. They got to create some pressure. They are 41st in the country in potential points off of steals. That's going to be an opportunity where they can get some points off of UConn. But other than that, I mean, UConn's defense is I mean, and we're not even talking about the offense, which is ranks higher than defensively. But when you look at those numbers, it's really going to be tough for a San Diego State team who's ranked 52nd in the country in offensive efficiency to really budge against that UConn defense.
Going back, just kind of, you got my mind thinking a little bit with San Diego State potentially applying a little bit more ball pressure than maybe even they did last year. We saw UConn have a little bit of trouble with St. John's ball pressure. I'm not saying Dutcher's defenses press nearly as much as Patino just historically, but you go back to the title game last year, San Diego State shot 23 threes. And if you remember, and I remember and remembering correctly, they kind of went at Sanogo early on with Mensa, and it did not work. And that really let UConn take advantage in transition, especially in the latter part of the final 10 minutes of that first half when UConn really started to blow the doors off San Diego State. I know the Aztecs made a bit of a run in the second half. Still, though, if the Aztecs want to win this game, I know I mentioned mid-range efficiency, but I think they're going to have to play the high variance role of a dog, which is shoot a lot of threes.
Yeah, I still think it's going to come from the turnover end. I look at this in the team right now. You got 4 guys who average over a steal per game. Anywhere for you got Trammell, Parrish, Butler, and Ledee all qualify for that route. Are going that route. I just don't see it here for San Diego State. I just think that this is just going to be that fallback that we talked about. I still think that Connecticut is arguably the most dominant team in this country. You're getting them a little, obviously both teams get that rest, but all of a sudden San Diego State has that great performance. You're off a few games. I look at them to regress here. I still think the UConn rolls.